And welcome back. Well, since the outbreak of COVID-19, there has been a significant shortage of infant formulas nationwide, with baby formula increasingly hard to find on store shelves. Concerns are growing for Black and Hispanic families who have low income, and also low income families, I should say, who have less access to products, in some cases, greater need than some of their white counterparts. And joining us now is the Vice President of Food and Benefits Access at United Way of New York City, Cheryl Huber. And Cheryl, glad to have you. And unfortunately, at a really troubling time when we talk about this baby formula shortage, talk to us about what you're seeing on your end.
Yes, unfortunately, this is a crisis that is hitting all New Yorkers, parents who have young children who rely on formula. Um, this is an incredibly stressful time for those families. Formula is not something that is easily replaced by another food source. For young babies, they're either being breastfed or they're getting formula. There are women who do both, who breastfeed and provide formula. And for those women, they can try to ramp up breast milk production, but that is not always possible. It's difficult. Many families turn to formula because they can't breastfeed or, have other issues. So, there's a lot of hurdles in place feeding babies of this age because their diets, are so particular and limited. And so it's really, really stressful for families who are not able to get what they need right now. Families are traveling to multiple stores. This is something that might be easier for a family who has more resources, but for lower income families, this often is not possible. And for those who receive WIC benefits, it's very likely that they won't be able to find something that they can purchase using those benefits.
What can you tell us about how this is really impacting our New York City community? Because in such a dense population as New York City, families, babies, parents trying to get their hands on this formula is really scarce.
It is scarce and it's scary. When you are responsible for a young baby, all you want to do is be able to take care of that child and make sure that they're getting what they need. I think what we're seeing in particular is through the Emergency Food Network. This is, being able to access formula is already very difficult in a normal year, in the Emergency Food Network. So families who are visiting pantries, it's not a product that's regularly available because it is a little more expensive, it's more in demand, and pantries are really relying on donations from corporations or grocery stores who might have extra. But at a time like this, there is no extra. And, we've heard from many partners on the ground and larger partners like the Food Bank and City Harvest who just are not getting these products in, which makes it even more challenging for families that don't have income to be able to go out and purchase these items.
Yeah. We hear a little bit about WIC and the work that goes on there, but unfortunately, WIC isn't covering all of these formulas. What can you tell us about why WIC is not doing this? Because some people say it's an easy, no-brainer call.
Yeah, the WIC question is really interesting. And, I think something that's come to light during this crisis is the fact that, baby formula is a very highly regulated market and about 4 companies control 90% of that market. So it's very top heavy, not a monopoly, but it's close to that, where there's a high barrier to get in because it's a highly regulated product. It does need to be formulated so specifically to serve the needs of infants. So we'd love to see, more manufacturers able to get into this marketplace. Another thing that's come up, I think, in this conversation nationally is the fact that 50% of formula that's purchased in the United States is purchased through WIC benefits. So, for those who are less familiar, WIC is the Women, Infants, and Children program that provides pregnant women, nursing mothers, and children under 5 with the ability to get nutritious products. But it's a really prescriptive program. So like you're sort of limited in the kinds of things you can buy if you're on WIC benefits. You have to get the jar of peanut butter, and same with the WIC form with the infant formula. It's very typically a state will sign a contract with one formula producer, and they're guaranteed, maybe a more affordable price and sufficient supply, but it also means that there's not a lot of options within that market. So if a state is contracted with a formula producer that is shut down because of a safety violation, then there's not going to be sufficient supply anymore in that area.
Yeah. We heard from the president that he was first made aware of, President Biden, he was first made aware of the WIC short, not the WIC shortage, but the baby formula shortage sometime in April. And I know he's got some plans in place trying to really deal with this matter front and center. But what have we heard locally from government in terms of assistance in this plight?
Well, we were pleased to see that, Mayor Adams declared a state of emergency fairly early on and has empowered the Department of Consumer Affairs to work to prevent price gouging, so that if you do find that formula, you're going to be paying a fair price for it. And New York State has been really promoting their communication channels through WIC, where you can call and find out where to get formula in your community. So I do think government has been trying to address this. I think a lot of the problems really are in that supply chain and the fact that there are so few producers. And so if one gets shut down, it really has a dramatic impact. But one thing we would love to see is just more support for folks to know if they qualify for programs like WIC, SNAP, these programs that can help families afford these sorts of products on a regular basis.
Yeah, we have a food shortage. We've got a formula shortage. You got a food insecurity that's going on in our community. I know that you're also working hands-on in terms of dealing with the food insecurity of New York City residents. Give us a little insight into what's going on with the work that you've got going on, and how are things going?
Well, the emergency food system and the network we have in New York City is incredibly robust. We have, close to 1,000 food pantries and soup kitchens in the city that are serving New Yorkers every day. And unfortunately, this formula crisis is really impacting the same families who are facing food insecurity on a regular basis. We know that Black women are less likely to breastfeed than white and Asian and Hispanic women. And that's partially because, if you are they tend to have lower wage jobs. And if you have a lower wage job, you might be returning to work more quickly after having a baby. You might be allotted less or no ability to pump breast milk in the workplace. These are really important factors that enable and empower women to be able to feed their children the way that they want to. And it's clear that there's a disparity here that needs to be addressed, just like there is across our food system. We see certain communities just have less access to high quality products, might have to rely on travel more, might not be able to access food that's culturally relevant for their families. So these, unfortunately, it's the same cycle of populations being impacted by these types of issues.
So for you, where does the work go from here? I mean, obviously, you got your hands full dealing with the food shortage, dealing with the baby formula shortage. How's United Way moving forward now?
Well, we're going to continue to do our work to educate and empower New Yorkers to sign up for those nutrition benefits like SNAP. That's a big part of our food and benefits access team, is really reaching out to New Yorkers and making sure that they know whether they're eligible, how to apply. We have folks that handhold people through the process so that they can get on those benefits when they're entitled to. And we're also going to continue to push for policies that will, diversify the formula market and really just support low-income communities and communities of color that have been disproportionately impacted by, everything since COVID-19 happened. And we want to see, if there are emergency supplies of formula coming into New York City, we want to see a portion of those supplies funneled through to the emergency food network so that they can get to families who can't afford to buy those products and who might not be able to travel to every, convenience store or drugstore in their neighborhood to access those products.
So for you, I want to talk a little bit more about this topic of food insecurity. I want to talk a little bit about COVID-19 because all of that played a part into the food insecurity. It is further exacerbated, I'll say. But talk to us about where you are now because COVID-19 only further exacerbated what was already existing for you. How has it gotten better or worse with COVID-19 on the issue of food insecurity? Has it had to cause you to double your efforts and double what you do?
Well, we have certainly ramped up since COVID-19, ramped up the distributions that we do in terms of funding for emergency food partners who are feeding people every day. Food insecurity is still higher than it was in 2019. And a huge part of it now is the fact that of rising food costs. Food costs have gone up 10% between March of 2021 and March of 2022. So those impacts are huge on families, and we see families that may not have relied on food pantries before, that are now, they might be back at work, they might, some of the normalcy of life may have returned, but the fact that food costs are so high is forcing them to rely on pantries and on the emergency food network. So we want to just continue to try to support those families so that they're getting, if they're coming to a pantry, that they're getting healthy food, they're getting nutritious options and fresh fruits and vegetables. And at the same time, we also make sure to support through the Nourish New York program. We're making sure that the food dollars that we spend are staying in New York State and really going to support New York farms and local distributors who are really promoting the regional economy and really helping to keep the dollar in New York.
Yeah, it's really been a tough time, I think, for New Yorkers, and really, I think that as we're moving, we're getting better. We're getting better with this. So you're optimistic, particularly when we're talking about the baby formula shortage, that we'll probably see some good success in the short term.
I am optimistic. I think, we've heard the Abbott plant that was shut down is back up and running. It's going to be a few weeks longer until that supply gets back into the market. But I think that just like any crisis, people really come together. We've heard a lot of wonderful stories about folks finding, supplies of formula, donating them to food pantries. We had a wonderful a pantry that we work with called Sisters with Purpose in the Bronx that benefited from a nice donation of formula and was able to distribute that throughout their community. So these are great, great short-term solutions. And I think that when crises like this happen, we have to learn from them. We have to take these points and use them in our advocacy strategies with city, state, and federal government. We have to make sure that this type of thing can't happen again. Everyone says, the richest country in the world, and, we're sort of not able to feed our most vulnerable New Yorkers, our most vulnerable Americans, are struggling to access the food that they need, and that's just unacceptable.
Yeah. Are we seeing more and more seniors being impacted?
By the food crisis, certainly. I think that seniors, they are sometimes less likely to want to enroll in nutrition benefit programs like SNAP. They might feel a little bit more trepidation around taking that kind of entitlement that they're certainly able to access, but sometimes are less willing to kind of put themselves out there and access those benefits. So we've always seen lots of seniors in the emergency food network. I think the presence of more families, working families, has been the more surprising thing, honestly, in the last couple of years. We're really seeing working families that are out there every day and unfortunately still can't make it work to be able to afford all the food that they need. So, in New York, we have a high cost of living, and that's also something we really need to work on, is how do we keep the city affordable for people who live here?
Right. And I want to ask you before we wrap, how can people be able to assist in the work of the United Way? You do a great job of helping so many others, but how can the public actually help and assist you?
Well, that's a wonderful question. We have lots of events and promotions and ways to get involved and donate on our website, which is unitedwaynyc.org. We also, we have a wonderful resource for those who might be in need of help or who are food insecure. We have a digital platform called Plentiful. The website is plentifulapp.com. And folks can actually download the app on their phone, and they can see where all the pantries are in their neighborhood. So it helps you locate a pantry. You can find out their open hours, and you can really access, what you need right in your own neighborhood through that tool.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank you so much for joining us and sharing. I think that a lot can be said for United Way in terms of trying to bridge the gap. We do have this baby formula shortage. We do have a food insecurity shortage, but we're grateful that we have organizations such as yourself that are really standing in the gap, trying to make things happen. And I know it's an uphill battle, but keep on fighting. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much, Daren. Have a great day.
All righty, Kathy Huber, our guest here, and want to let you know that guess what? You can find out more as we continue to work here. And I'm sorry, I said Kathy, Cheryl, I'm sorry. Cheryl Huber, our guest here from the United Way. I want to thank her for sharing with us. Now, listen, if we want more information, don't forget to go visit the website. And until then, got to take a quick break. We'll be back with more. Thanks again so much, Cheryl.